Batya, what's on your radar?
There's a historic surge in migrants illegally crossing into the United States. This June alone, over 200,000 migrants were apprehended, the most ever for that month. Overwhelmed, border state governor Greg Abbott of Texas has started putting migrants on buses to Washington, D.C. and New York City. Both are sanctuary cities, meaning their police departments don't cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement officials. Mayor Eric Adams of New York and Mayor Muriel Bowser of D.C. blasted Abbott and begged the government for federal assistance with what is quickly becoming a humanitarian crisis. Amazingly, the liberal media found a way to blame the right for this crisis. Cold-blooded Texas Gov vows to dump asylum seekers in the middle of D.C. was how the Daily Beast covered the story. GOP governors cause havoc by busing migrants to the East Coast, explained the New York Times. GOP governors sent buses of migrants to D.C. with no plan for what came next, says NPR. Leave it to the liberal legacy media to find a way to blame Republicans for the Biden administration's bungling of the southern border. Unlike the New York Times, migrants are not confused about who deserves credit for their arrival in the U.S. One migrant told reporters back in March, Biden promised us that everything was going to change. Another cried into her phone, Biden promised us. A Haitian migrant told Fox News, he promised the Haitian community he will help them. A Honduran woman told Politico, I just need the U.S. to tell me when we can cross. Biden has given us 100 days to get to the U.S. and give us legal papers, another migrant from Honduras told CNN right after Biden took office, referencing a Biden administration moratorium on deportations for his first 100 days in office, which was also mentioned by children at the border who told a Fox News reporter that they came because Biden had welcomed them to the U.S. and said they had 100 days to get to freedom. Where did millions of migrants get the idea that Biden had opened the border? Well, from Biden himself. During the primary debates, then candidate Biden said that migrants illegally crossing the border should not be detained, and like nearly every other candidate, said he would decriminalize illegal border crossing.
Should someone who is here without documents, and that is his only offense, should that person be deported?
That person should not be the focus of deportation. We should fundamentally change the way we deal with things.
Millions of migrants were listening, along with the human traffickers who extort, torture, rape, and kill them. And Biden more or less followed through as president. From day one in office, the president stopped construction of a border wall with Mexico, ended President Trump's travel ban, restricting travel from 14 countries, and dramatically reduced deportations from 267,000 in 2019 to just 59,000 in 2021. The Biden administration also vowed to end Title 42, a Trump-era restriction that allowed migrants to be turned away due to the pandemic, though a federal judge in Louisiana has for now blocked Biden's attempt to end the policy. And the Supreme Court recently gave the Biden administration the green light to end another highly effective Trump-era program known as Remain in Mexico that allowed border agents to turn migrants away and have them wait for their asylum cases in Mexico. Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have both told migrants not to come to the U.S. over the past year. But actions speak louder than words. From October 2021 to June 2022, Border Patrol logged over 2 million migrant encounters, another all-time record. And of the migrants who crossed the border illegally, just 13% have reported to an immigration and customs enforcement office. It's as close as you can come to open borders without actually opening the border. So it's ironic, to say the least, that the White House, like the liberal media that represents its voter base, blamed Governor Abbott for the mass migration into American cities. White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre called it a shameful political ploy last week, another great show of gaslighting from an administration that has made it an art form. What's perhaps most surprising about all this is that this open border policy represents a total reversal on the part of the left. Until very recently, the free market Republicans were the ones pushing for things like amnesty and easy access to migrant labor, while the Democrats were the side of limiting immigration. Back in the 1990s, Barbara Jordan, the first Black woman from the South elected to Congress and chair of the U.S. Commission on Immigration Reform, wrote that the commission found no natural interest in continuing to import lesser skilled and unskilled workers to compete in the most vulnerable parts of our labor force. Watch Democratic Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders' reaction as recently as 2015 to the suggestion by journalist Ezra Klein that the U.S. should have open borders.
Open borders.
Foreign aid.
No,
Open borders.
that's a Koch brothers proposal. The
Really?
idea, of course. I mean, that's a right-wing proposal, which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of the global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. And I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that. If you believe in a nation state, or in a country called the United States, or UK, or Denmark, or any other country, you have an obligation, in my view, to do everything we can to help poor people. What right-wing people in this country would love is an open border policy. Bring in all kinds of people who work for $2 or $3 an hour. That would be great for them. I don't believe in that. I think we have to raise wages in this country. I think we have to do everything that we can to create the millions of jobs.
Open borders? That's a Koch brothers proposal. Sanders insisted just 6 years ago. Fast forward to that 2020 primary debate, and Sanders, just like Biden, said he would support decriminalizing illegal border crossing. What happened? Why the 180? It's especially surprising given that the Democrats' base, or what used to be their base, agrees more with Bernie 2015 than Bernie 2020. In 2019, at the height of the Trump era, a large majority of Black and Hispanic Americans said they would vote for a presidential candidate who stood for strengthening our border security to reduce illegal immigration, a Harvard-Harris poll found. That shouldn't be surprising. Illegal immigration has been tied to a 20 to 60% decrease in Black working-class wages. Another recent study suggested that immigration accounts for a third of the decline in the Black employment rate over the last 40 years. Black Americans are more supportive of limiting immigration than any other bloc of the Democratic coalition, writes sociologist Musa Al-Garbi. And Hispanics actually tend to be more concerned about illegal immigration than are whites or Blacks. Why did the Democrats abandon these voters? Why the flip-flop on immigration from those furthest to the left who once had the multiracial working class as their top concern? Many who support mass immigration do so ostensibly because of the overall effect on GDP, which is positive. But they tend not to ask positive for whom. It is, of course, the elites who benefit from the rise, people whose professional jobs would never be threatened by someone who doesn't speak English, who can benefit economically from the cheaper products and cheap labor that free trade and mass immigration brings into their homes, while the American working classes pay for it as good jobs are sacrificed on the altar of helping the indigent of other countries. Point this out, and you can count on a member of the squad to call you racist, a ridiculous accusation given who has paid the highest price for mass immigration. The history of citizenship in the U.S. is deeply woven with the history of racism, tweeted Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez back in 2019. It has been used as the legal enforcer of racism for most of U.S. history. We should not abandon our values and rights to far-right white nationalists, tweeted Congresswoman Ilhan Omar when Vice President Kamala Harris told migrants to stay home. But as is so often the case, the accusation of bigotry hides a class divide that has seen the Democrats choose educated, leftist, white elites over the working class again and again, and then misunderstand their class privilege as higher virtue. And it's that class divide that explains how the Democrats came to be the side of open borders. Remember that immigrants make up nearly half of America's household servants, 42% of taxi drivers and chauffeurs, and 35% of grounds maintenance workers. The people employing these migrant workers are the people who the Democrats' reversal on immigration is designed to appeal to, an overeducated leftist elite who would rather employ the poor of other countries than offer any kind of protections to the working class of their own. The squad are these people's patron saints. Of course, I believe they also have compassion for migrants crossing the border in search of a better life. I do too. It's impossible not to feel heartbroken for anyone looking for a better life for their children. But what about our own struggling workers? Why no compassion for them? Moreover, this quote-unquote compassionate approach to immigration is incentivizing truly dangerous behaviors, leading to parents drowning in the Rio Grande with their babies and to children riding La Bestia and watching as other children fall off to their deaths. A third of women who make the trip admit to being sexually abused, and that's only the ones we know of. And nearly everyone is preyed upon in some way by the powerful cartels that now effectively control the border. Trump may have gone too far with his family separation policy, but taken as a whole, his relentless approach to securing the border ended up preventing a lot of cruelty, both to would-be migrants and to American workers. Like so much of what passes for political debate in America in 2022, the fight between Governor Abbott and Mayor Adams is not about politics so much as it is about class. Democrats want an open border to stroke the egos of their elite base who benefit economically from their vanity virtues, while demanding that Texas absorb without complaint the millions of migrants who their policies have opened the door to. Now, the humanitarian crisis is extending here in the U.S. at a time of record homelessness. Thousands and thousands of migrants are now joining their ranks in cities across the country, fueling a 10% growth in homelessness since May in New York City alone. There's been a surge of fentanyl seizures at the U.S.-Mexico border, directly linked to the skyrocketing of overdose deaths. Meanwhile, the influx of foreign workers is offsetting the increase in wages that the tight labor market would otherwise be affording American workers. Perhaps worst of all, migrant deaths at the southern border have surged under the Biden administration, a Washington Examiner investigation uncovered. Authorities have found 609 bodies since the start of 2022, a record high which doesn't include bodies discovered further north of the border in California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Some of these deaths made headlines, like the 50 souls who perished in the back of an abandoned truck in South Texas earlier this year, or the migrant from Nicaragua who drowned crossing the Rio Grande River in May, in the same area that a 22-year-old National Guard specialist drowned in April, or the body of a small child recovered in the Rio Grande Valley whose brother is still missing. But most of these tragic and totally preventable deaths go unmarked. This is leftist compassion curdled into cruelty, and it's not Governor Abbott's fault. It's President Biden's. The White House is right about one thing, though. It's shameful. Robbie, where are you on this issue?
Well, we do have some disagreements here, but of course, no disagreement about the dangerous border crossings. This is not the right way to come into the country. It is not good for the people doing it. It should not be the option at all. But I think look, people are trying to get into this country. They want to come to America because we are the land of freedom and opportunity, and we have a lot to offer. People want to come here, and we benefit from immigrants. I think you and I probably differ or disagree a little bit on how widespread those benefits are. You know, I take the view that we're not all workers, but we're all, or in fields that are affected by immigration in the way you're describing, but we all are consumers of food. We all need housing. We all need things that get cheaper when we have better access to labor, just like when we have better access to microchips, or we have better access to labor is a resource like any other. So I want to make it easier for people to come here and work legally, not illegally, because then, right, you have this abuse and you have this violence. But in order to not have more of the illegal crossing, we really do need more of the legal crossing. Are we going to have totally open borders? No, I don't know if it's a right-wing proposal, but we need to monitor the people coming in to some degree for national security reasons at least. But I do want to make it easier to come here, and I think that's better for it's obviously it's better for the people if they're choosing something other than the illegal border crossing, and we can really benefit from these people economically. And then if people get left behind because of that, because they get outcompeted, then I guess we have to talk about, what can society do for those people. But I don't want to, it feels like holding us all back in order to keep wages artificially high for workers in a couple sectors when we would all benefit from bringing down prices and more available housing, food, et cetera. But that's my view. That's the right-wing Koch brothers view, I guess.
Represent.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm more in the Bernie 2015 camp. Where's that guy, right? I think that this sort of very depressing thing happened where, there was all of this offshoring of really good working class jobs that lead to middle class lifestyles, with all these trade deals that happened, in the heartland. And the motto was learn to code, right? We're going to get these people jobs in the information sector.
Yeah, that's not happening. That's ridiculous.
That's not
obviously.
happening. But also, I mean, the next stage of the offshoring of manufacturing jobs was importing all of these tech workers. So, there's all of this sidestepping of the huge amount of talent that's in America that goes, just left, fallow, all of the sort of mute unsung Miltons in our inner cities who never get a fair shot because it's so easy to get workers, from other countries. And I, like Bernie Sanders in 2015, I'm against that.
Well, that's what you get on Rising, a real exchange of ideas. We do disagree on this, and we made our arguments for how we feel about it. But I thank you so much for sharing what's on your radar with us, Batya. We so appreciate it. And we'll have more Rising after these messages.